Imagine a business so powerful it profits from destruction, not despite it, but because of it. A business that doesn't just survive war, it requires it. While soldiers fight and cities burn, someone is cashing in, quietly, relentlessly. They are called banks. For centuries, war has been their most reliable client. Not peace, not prosperity, but chaos. Because every bomb dropped, every army raised, every nation rebuilt, means one thing: more debt. And debt is the banker's true battlefield. This isn't conspiracy, it's history. And once you see the pattern, you'll never look at a conflict the same way again. Let's go back to when war stopped being tragedy and started being business. Wars don't begin with gunfire. They begin with signatures. Before the first soldier marches or the first bomb falls, there's a meeting. Quiet, polished, confidential, where someone decides how to pay for it. Because war isn't fought with courage or flags. It's fought with credit. No empire, no democracy, no republic has ever waged a major war without borrowing. The math makes it impossible. The cost of feeding armies, building weapons, and replacing what's destroyed always outpaces what taxes can raise. So governments turn to the only force powerful enough to create money from nothing: banks. In the ledgers of financiers, war is not tragedy, it's opportunity. Each cannon and tank represents not just metal, but interest. The longer the conflict, the larger the return. Every promise to defend freedom becomes a promise to repay debt, with interest, collected long after the war has ended. This isn't new. When kings ran out of gold, they didn't stop fighting. They simply borrowed against the future. They mortgaged peace itself. And bankers learned a lesson that would define centuries. War is the ultimate customer. It never defaults. It never sleeps. And it always comes back. From ancient city-states to modern superpowers, the cycle repeats. Politicians declare enemies. Banks provide the means. People provide the labour, the taxes, the blood. And when the smoke clears, the winners rebuild with borrowed money, again from the same institutions that funded the destruction. It's a perfect loop, polished over centuries. Destroy, rebuild, collect. And hidden beneath the ruins lies the quiet truth. War doesn't break economies, it feeds them. Let's trace that loop back to where it began, when the business of war became the business of banking. The year is 1815. Cannons thunder across Europe as Napoleon fights his final battles. But in London, the real war is being waged, not on the battlefield, but in the markets. A single banking family is financing armies, speculating on victory, and reshaping the future. This was the Napoleonic Wars, a bloodbath for millions, but a goldmine for the banks. Because when both sides need money, neutrality becomes the most profitable position. You don't pick a side, you fund both. And you get paid either way. Fast forward a century. World War I erupts, and once again, banks step in, this time with war bonds. Governments promise safety and patriotism in exchange for your money. Citizens lend to fund the war, believing they're doing their part. But behind the posters and slogans, it's a business deal. The real winners aren't on the front lines. They're in boardrooms. During World War II, the pattern only deepens. In the US, the Federal Reserve coordinates with the Treasury to keep interest rates low, allowing the government to borrow at scale. Hundreds of billions are poured into the war effort, financed through debt, managed by bankers, underwritten by future taxpayers. The end of the war doesn't end the cycle. It institutionalizes it. The Bretton Woods system rewires global finance, central banks gain unprecedented power, and the post-war recovery becomes the next great opportunity. What started as emergency lending is now permanent policy. War creates demand. Demand creates debt. Debt creates profit. And for the institutions behind the curtain, peace is a pause, not a goal, because the next war is always just a signature away. The question is, what happens when war becomes the model for economic growth? The answer lies in the modern era, and the wars that never seem to end. The Twin Towers fell, and within hours, a new war began. But this time, the battlefield wasn't just Afghanistan or Iraq, it was the global balance sheet. The War on Terror became the most expensive conflict in human history, not because of its scale, but because of its duration. 2 decades, trillions spent, and yet no formal victory, no end date. For defence contractors and the banks behind them, that was the point. Governments issued bonds. Central banks kept interest rates low, and the debt machine roared to life. Every drone, every convoy, every foreign base, financed not by taxes, but by credit. Major banks helped underwrite these bonds. Hedge funds and institutions bought them up, locking in safe state-guaranteed returns. While soldiers fought desert wars, portfolios swelled back home. And as the cost ballooned, no one cut spending. Instead, the Federal Reserve printed more money. Stimulus wasn't for the public. It was to keep the system liquid, so the war economy could continue. This is where war becomes a feature, not a bug. It's no longer declared with urgency. It's managed like a portfolio. Long-term, diversified, quietly profitable. Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Libya. Conflict moves, but the model stays the same. Borrow, bomb, rebuild, repeat. Trillions went out. And where did they go? To weapons manufacturers, logistics firms, and the banks that finance them. To interest payments on debt, owed not just by the government, but by you. You didn't vote for the war, but you'll pay for it, through taxes, inflation, and opportunity lost. And the most chilling part? No one expects these wars to end anymore. Because when conflict becomes a business model, peace is bad for growth. And in modern finance, nothing is allowed to shrink. The numbers are staggering, trillions in debt, interest compounding by the second. But the real burden of war doesn't sit on the ledgers of governments or banks. It sits on the backs of ordinary people. Every bullet fired, every aircraft fueled, every base maintained. All of it comes from somewhere. From your taxes, from your purchasing power, from what your government could have spent on you but didn't. While the balance sheets of defence contractors rise, the public balance tilts. Hospitals age, schools crumble, infrastructure decays. The wealth extracted through war isn't just financial, it's generational. Every dollar borrowed to fight becomes a dollar not invested in the future. And yet, the institutions behind it all face no real risk. Banks don't bleed when nations fight. They earn. Their loans are backed by law, their interest guaranteed by your labour. They call it stability. You experience it as stagnation. Inflation becomes the invisible tax. Prices rise not by accident, but by design. The quiet repayment of wartime debt through the erosion of your savings. And when that happens, governments rebrand it. They call it stimulus. They call it defence spending. They call it security aid. But look closely at the flow of money. From taxpayer to treasury. From treasury to bond market. From bond market to banks. From banks to defence. And back again. A closed loop. Efficient, elegant, and endless. You thought war was about patriotism? It's about payments. The battlefield is lined with graves. The balance sheet is lined with gains. So what does this mean for you? Someone with no tanks, no lobbyists, no leverage? It means understanding the system isn't enough. You have to see where you stand inside it. Let's state it plainly. Banks don't just survive war, they require it. Because war is not an interruption of the system. It is the system. Conflict creates the perfect conditions for credit expansion. It suspends scrutiny, accelerates spending, and justifies debt at scale. And in a financial world driven by debt, that makes war profitable by design. Our global economy isn't addicted to peace. It's addicted to perpetual conflict, because that's where the margins are. This isn't conspiracy, it's arithmetic, and the math never lies. So what do you do in a world where the bombs are funded by your taxes and the rebuilding is funded by your debt? First, understand. War is debt. Debt is control. If you want to break free, you have to see the chains, not just the carnage. Second, diversify. Real assets, land, skills, production, remain valuable when illusions fade. Don't store your future in a system that profits from its own instability. Third, question. Every flag waved, every speech made, ask who profits. Patriotism is powerful. That's why. It's used to sell everything from cereal to war. Because the truth is this, war didn't bankrupt us. It enriched the few and indebted the rest. And unless we recognise that this is a business model, not a bug in the system, it will continue. Because peace doesn't pay dividends. History doesn't repeat. But if you don't see the pattern, you're already part of it. If this gave you a new perspective, don't just scroll away, hit subscribe. This is Economic Chronicles, where history exposes the present and the future is written in the lessons we refuse to learn.